Welcome to the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. I'm dedicated to helping you take control of your life. Together, we'll explore practical tips, expert advice, and inspiring stories to help you overcome obstacles and achieve your goals. Making small changes is possible and can lead to big results. Are you ready? Let's go do this. Well, Amy Chambers, welcome to the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. I am extremely excited about our conversation because when your book passed my came across your book, The 6 Habits of Powerful People Becoming a Happy Human Who Has It All. I love the title because don't we all want to be happy humans who have it all? So I'm, like I said, really excited about our conversation. What's intriguing is the subtitle, because I don't think we're always worthy. People don't always think they're worthy or capable of being somebody who has it all. So we're going to start there. Give a little background of yourself, and then we'll go from there.
All right, sounds good. It's so good to be here, Sue. Born and raised in Buffalo, New York. Did undergrad at Notre Dame in Indiana. Ended up in California about 17 years ago to do my MBA at USC. Spent 21 years in financial services, started as a teller, finished as a COO, and then realized my passion was all about coaching, leadership consulting, helping people change their lives. So been out on my own for about 3 years now. And as part of that, my lifelong dream was to write books. So I've got 2 of them out, and 6 Habits was the second one. And the subtitle, I think you're so right. We have a lot of limiting, sabotaging beliefs, and most of us don't even know that we have them. I love the Henry Ford adage of whether you think you can or think you can't, either way, you're right. And I really do agree with you that many of us think it's impossible to have it all. It's like, I can't be a mother and a great friend and travel and have a wonderful career. And what I've found to be true is that if that's what you believe, that is what you will make happen. Our brains don't want to make liars out of ourselves. And so if you say, that's probably not possible for me, or I'm not the kind of person that can have that sort of thing, maybe someone else could, but that just isn't applicable to me, you will find data and evidence and examples to prove that true. Self-fulfilling prophecies are a real thing. But if you believe that you can have it all and you say, I am going to find a way, I will make this happen, it's amazing what you'll run into. You'll find resources and tools and a support system to help you. You will find ways to figure it out. And so we really can have it all, but it starts with us knowing that and believing that. One cool video I once saw, John Azaroff, he's a fellow coach and consultant, and he tells this great story about how when he was younger, he got asked by someone he really looked up to, are you interested or are you committed? And what he realized over time is that the difference between those two things, if you're interested in success or finding a way, you'll just sort of do what's convenient. But if you're committed, you will do whatever it takes. And I do think that if we really want to have it all, it starts with being committed and really believing that whatever we want, we can do it. We will do it. We are going to do it. So, the subtitle was very important to me.
Yeah, no, it hits the spot there. And, like you said, the word belief. And how often do we go through life and we're like, I just don't believe that thing. I mean, what our words say really do matter. It's like, oh, I don't believe I can be a millionaire. And I think or I don't believe that I could achieve that goal. I don't believe I can get that job. I don't believe that I can be a really good, whatever it is that, we're at. And what's your take on somebody who has that narrative to themselves? And they say like, I just, and I'm sure you've come across them where like, yeah, I hear you, Amy, but I just can't get to that other side of believing. What's your advice?
I'm so happy you asked that. I'm giving you a big smile because I have a lot of thoughts on this. Probably one of the best and most important discoveries I've made in my life is this concept that belief comes before knowledge. So we see and hear a lot of people that say, I'll believe it when I see it. And what I've figured out is that we can run that equation or that statement in reverse. And really, for us to see it, we often have to believe it first. And there are so many examples of this in our history. Colonel Sanders is probably a great one. KFC. Not sure if you're a Kentucky Fried Chicken fan or not, but he knocked on over 1,000 doors. I think it was 1,008 before somebody said yes to him. And he had this belief of this world famous, really internationally famous chicken recipe. And he got turned down over 1,000 times. Ultimately, Alexander Graham Bell,
Yeah.
Thomas Edison. There's all
Yeah,
these stories
Edison
of
light
their
bulbs. Yes,
failures.
that one I'm familiar with. Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, I'm glad you shared that. Your story is really inspiring when I looked into it. You went from a non-runner to a marathoner and from a bank teller, as you mentioned, to a successful COO. Can you share a pivotal moment in your life or moments that motivated you to embrace such a radical transformation? Because they are, you're going from one end to another, and some people just get stuck where they are. So you overcame whatever it was that was, in your life. So you want to talk a little bit about that and maybe encourage some people along the way?
absolutely. Thank you for that. That's very sweet. And probably the biggest thing that happened that really set all of that into action. I was going through a breakup in 2015. I was in love with this guy. I thought we'd get married. In my mind, it was very abrupt. And what I figured out is that change tends to happen when the pain of staying the same becomes greater than that pain of change. And I was by myself. We had a lot of kind of joint shared friends. And I had stopped kind of going out with these people because really those had been friends we'd had together. And so I didn't want to run into this person. And I was grieving. And I remember sitting in the bathtub, just sobbing one night, completely alone. And I was really alone in this kind of trauma and this devastation for a lot of months. But I had this kind of wake up call of something's got to change. I can't keep doing this. I'm depressed. I'm struggling to do well at work. I've got to do something different. And I hired a therapist. I asked my boss's boss, who I really looked up to mentor me, began reading some books. And I started going outside for walks because I just realized that some sunshine and fresh air was helping me. And slowly over time, I began experimenting with this idea of, hey, life is hard sometimes, but we can do hard things. And maybe struggle is a good thing. It's supposed to take you to your next phase of evolution. And little by little, I went from walking to jogging to running. And I became a runner. I realized running was making me feel good. It was helping me take accountability and responsibility for myself. And at some point, I was able to go from a 5K to a 10K to a half to a full marathon. And I'll never forget, in the beginning of 2016, I ran my first full marathon. And that was probably the most transformational moment of my life. I came through the finish line. I was crying, just sobbing, because I had proven to myself that we could change things about ourselves. And I had made this decision of, I can become a different person than what I was in that relationship. By the way, side note, I think the reason that breakup happened is I wasn't practicing any of the 6 habits. I didn't even know what they were. I hadn't conceived them yet. And that led me to a lot of struggles in a lot of areas of my life. But yeah, running was really this therapeutic thing that I developed from a very dark, low place. And it was the thing that taught me, hey, you're going to be okay. You can do new things. You're going to probably see another relationship, or you're going to live through this. And I've used that since then to help me with many other struggles. I can do hard things. Struggle and challenge is good. It's going to be okay. Nothing is permanent. But yeah, it took a breakup for me to change.
Yeah, no, I love what you said, that everything is going to be okay, and change is hard, but change is good. And often we just don't want to embrace the change, and we think life should be easy, but it's really out of the pain and suffering a lot of times, depending on how you use it, right? It's how you said you went from a victim standpoint, like victim mentality, for a while,
Yep,
several months, until you realize that, wait a minute, the only person who can change my circumstance is me.
love
And
it.
so now I need to do something inside myself. It's not anything that's outside of me. It's the person that's inside.
Love it.
And I want to transition into your 6 habits framework, because they're central to your book and your coaching practice. And you mentioned it, out of your challenges came your 6 habits. So you want to talk about those. And as you talk about those, which habit do you think is the most challenging for people to adopt? And we can come back to that question too.
Sure. I will say I struggle with all of them at various points in time. I've mastered none of them. And that's an interesting thing, because I did write the book, and I find these to be things that continually take work. Probably the one I see people struggle with the most is the B. It's befriend your brain. And in that habit, I talked a lot about this research and data that's out there. And to sort of simplify it, our brains have two components. There's a subconscious component, and then there's a conscious component. And all this data and science says your subconscious brain, which is where we house automated programs and our flight or fight response, it operates at a speed that's about 500,000 times faster than our subconscious brain. And that's a great thing, by the way. It's what helps us stop at a red light without us having to think about it, or pull away from a hot stove before we get burned. But that subconscious portion of our brain can also be very dangerous because it tends to carry out two big things. It tries to keep us safe and protect us from danger, and it runs old programs. And so the reason I think it's such a thing to work through is we have all these beliefs and values and paradigms that we were taught and really since infancy, but definitely as children. But even before we could walk or speak, our brain was starting to categorize all these stimuli and all this information coming in. So part of the reason that change is really hard is that our brain fights us. And whenever we're uncomfortable or we feel a little awkward or we're thinking, hey, maybe I should go up for that job, or maybe I should get out of this relationship, I'm not entirely happy, and maybe I should be single and start over, or maybe I should move across the country to, follow my heart. The brain tends to tell us, no, don't do that. That sounds really scary. Oh, isn't that going to be difficult? Yeah, you don't want to do that. Better to kind of stay with what you know. And so when people are trying to make big changes in their lives, I think it's so tough to overcome their brain because it is such a powerful device. Again, it's working at a speed and a rate much quicker than the conscious component of our brain. And people tend to kind of feel like the way I've been thinking and believing my whole life, it's got to be right. I couldn't possibly see it another way. It feels right to me because that's what I've always known. So I watch people struggle to change their beliefs and develop new systems to have success. Even when the old ones aren't working for them, because they get these messages that it would be wrong to go in a different direction. And it takes a lot of conscious effort to overcome that. So
I bet.
Artist.
Yeah, I would say it would some classify that subconscious brain as your ego. Because sometimes that's the ego talking too, like to make you like, ego can go a couple different ways. Ego is like, oh, I have a big inflated ego, or the ego is that part of your brain that's trying to keep you safe. Yes. At least that's how I've heard it explained before too. So, it's that part that says, hey, don't go do that. Just stay right where you are. The relationship you have is fine, but it's really not. But you're comfortable there.
That's right.
So I wasn't sure.
Very dangerous.
If
I
they
think
were
that the ego is what it often forces us or deludes us into thinking that the answers are outside of us. If there's a problem or a struggle, it must be the other person's fault or our boss's fault or the marketing department's fault. And it's hard for us to take accountability and responsibility. This is where the H, that honest humility and self-awareness piece comes in, because the ego doesn't want us to feel like there's something wrong with us and we've still got development and work to do. And maybe it's our fault and we should apologize first. It kind of tries to say, no, you don't have to do that, because sometimes it doesn't feel good to take responsibility or accountability, even if it's the right thing. So, that's all part of that brain. And I see that as a struggle with almost everybody. It's very few people are completely exempt from this sort of stuff. Pretty much all of us struggle with it at some point or another. In varying degrees. Yeah.
So the 6 habits, the first is the H is to have honest humility, which we talked a little bit about. A is for action. Do you find people struggling to take action? And what do you do to help people to overcome that action paralysis?
I do find people struggle to take action all the time. I call it a knowing doing gap. And I always tell people knowing without doing isn't really knowing. We often know what we need to do. I see lots of people trying to lose weight that are in the middle of eating a McDonald's cheeseburger and say, I know I shouldn't be doing this, and this probably isn't good for me, but oh, well, I'll start tomorrow. It's really hard for us to execute, even when we have great plans. And one of the things I do think helps a lot, and I have a lot of my clients do this exercise right when we first get together, is having a vision statement or a vision board or a mission statement, something to anchor yourself and tie yourself to. And I ask people to sort of look in the future and say, what do you want your life to look like in a year, 3 years, 5 years? Let's identify, really without any kind of limitations or what you don't think you can have, like what would be your ideal job, your ideal relationship, your ideal body? And then we work backwards off of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're able to say, okay, we want those things. We'd be really happy if our life looked that way. We had those things or did those things. So what's it going to take today to just get one step closer? I see a lot of people struggle because they think they've got to have the whole plan mapped out. I'm really big on people just saying, can you take one small step at a time? You don't need to know the 5th or 7th or 10th step, just what's the next step. And if it's just one at a time, one thing you can do this week to just get you closer to it. And so slowly, if we develop a regimen or a routine or a system of these small little things, it starts to build momentum of, hey, I am a person that can set goals and achieve them. I am a person that can make commitments and follow through. And so that's typically where it starts to help someone that's really struggling to follow through on their big plans and dreams.
Small steps to big wins. We talked about the B in habits to befriend your brain, because we need to be kind. I find that I struggle to be kind to myself, and just a daily reminder of being kind to yourself. Self-compassion goes a long way and has the ability to actually alter and change one's life when you are self-compassionate for yourself. And then I just, my 2 cents is, I find when I'm more compassionate with myself, I find it easier to have compassion for others as well. So befriend your brain, take care of your brain. The I is for inspire yourself. Does that go along with setting the vision board, and is it a little different? How do you talk about inspire yourself?
Yeah, there's several things here. One of the things that comes up in that habit a lot is what we expose our brains to and what we kind of let take our attention. There's a lot, both an I and the T, about the company we keep, the social media content we absorb, the things that we watch or listen to, and choosing things that are supportive of us and kind to us and adhere and affirm the messages is really critical. I can't tell you how many people don't feel inspired on a day-to-day basis to chase after these dreams and goals they've set in their vision statement. But if you look at all of their friends or their close contacts or their family, no one else is doing those things either. And they don't have anyone they can look up to. They're not consuming any inspiring information. And so that's a real problem. There's a concept out there: you are the average of 5, the top 5 people you keep. And so when I ask people really, like, who are you spending your hours with and who are you going hanging out with on the weekends, if it's not somebody that has the kind of life that you want or that you feel has done the things you're looking to do, again, that can be very uninspiring. And so finding ways to get in front of those things is a big piece of advice I give people. My running became a lot easier when I joined a run club and had a community of other runners that were also getting up early, that had these goals set, that were going to races. It became much more inspiring to get up at 6 a.m. and drive somewhere and get a bib and go out there and work for it when I knew other people doing the same thing. And so that's something I would say that comes up in that habit a lot.
Yeah, I love it. Life lived in isolation is very challenging. So when you start getting around people who live the life you want, or that you want to have, or at least build you up, not tear you down. But I love that the T is trust and treasure yourself, which we were just talking about, because really it is about self-care, taking care of yourself first. And what's really interesting about taking care of yourself is that often it can get twisted and say, well, you have to if you have a family, you have to take care of your family first, or, your husband comes first, your family comes first, and, your job comes first. And then when you're done, whatever's left over is for you. And we got it wrong. It's like, I grew up in the time frame where that was the paradigm. You took care of everybody else. You died to yourself. That was a common phrase in the circle that I was part of. You die to yourself. You just, it doesn't really matter what you think, because it's selfish. If you think a certain way, if you want to go take care of yourself, and I want to go do a bubble bath, or I want to go away for the weekend and have quiet time to myself, well, that's selfish. You can't do that. You're not taking care. And what I've come to learn, and I'm sure you unpack and you see it as well, is that it's not selfish. You actually do have to take care of yourself first, because if you don't take care of yourself first, then what's going to happen is you can't take care of those other people that you have to take care of. We got the narrative flipped. And
You're so right. I see
yeah,
this all the time. And I will say that the people I see struggle with it most are ladies and the women out there. I don't know if that was a programming thing from when we were little girls, but I see a lot of women struggle to keep up
yeah,
the demands of motherhood and keeping a house look a certain way. They also want careers. And it's hard to hear that message of it's not selfish to do things for yourself and have these desires and hopes and dreams and then achieve them and say what you need. It's actually very loving and kind to the people around you. You're going to be
hmm,
better for them when you've shown up for yourself. You can't pour from an empty cup. There's a reason
right,
that airplanes say put your own mask on first before you help
yeah,
others. And I do think that this is something we're talking about a lot more in society, but we still have those challenges with it. And I see these emotions come up, especially for women, men sometimes too, but more so ladies. There's this guilt and this shame, and it kind of
yeah,
eats us alive of like, oh, but I should be able to do it all, or I should be able to drive Jimmy to softball practice and also get Dana, my daughter, to the ballet lessons and get a hot, meal on the stove and do
yeah,
everything else. And we really put ourselves at last a lot. And I really encourage my clients to get rid of that and start that self-compassion and that self-love. And it's amazing once they do, they're actually better for all the other
yeah,
areas of their life around them. But I think we don't quite believe that. And maybe we weren't shown that back in the 70s or
yeah.
the 80s. I don't think this
No,
was as
and
commonly
yeah,
talked
it
about
wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't. What's one what's one tip or trick or tool that you would share with somebody to help them lose that shame or guilt that they're struggling with?
Yeah, I do believe that anytime we're trying to lose a past narrative or change how we feel about something, finding data points and evidence of the new belief working
Mm,
helps us develop kind of that new framework. And so saying, let's just test it out just this week. Again, one step at a time. Let's identify one thing you're going to do for yourself and you're going to put it on your calendar. Maybe you need to let your
mm,
husband know. You might need to set boundaries or ask someone or inform someone, hey, this is going to take place, but let's go ahead and do it and then see what happens. People have come back and said, I can't believe it. I refused to work Saturday and my boss didn't fire me. The building didn't burn down. Like everything was okay. I didn't check my phone during those hours. I did go take the
mhm,
bubble bath or I got myself to the gym and it was all right. And so we start using that information of, well, what if we tried that again next week? And over time, as people do it, I think it becomes normal and more, I guess, easier to say, yep, that actually is working for me. Whatever it was I was afraid of wasn't a real
mhm.
story. Those things of my family disliking me or me not being able to keep all the balls in the air aren't
Yeah,
actually taking place. So yeah, it's to
right.
experiment with it and then look at the data, look at the information, look at the actual evidence.
Okay. In your 6 habits out of all of those, I hear you talk about taking daily action, small steps, consistent daily action. It's often easier said than done. So how do you help how do you help the your readers either in your book or your clients stay motivated, especially when progress might seem really slow or challenges come up and they're like, I don't know if I keep doing this.
Yeah.
How do
I'm
you help them?
I'm chuckling because I thought everything is easier said than done. That's one thing I've learned for sure. This is a great question. I love this. The biggest thing I see that helps people with that is when they celebrate small wins and small victories along the way. So often we're focused on the destination and the end result
Mhm,
that we refuse to acknowledge progress. We're waiting for that destination, and that really hinders us. I encourage people to make a list either daily or weekly of things they're proud of, accomplishments that they've had that they feel good about, and be willing to also celebrate not just results, but their behaviors, their effort. Just, hey, how hard did you try today? And when we don't do that, I think we get very, very discouraged. One of the other things I think that's really important here is for us to say we should even celebrate our mistakes and our failures. If we're
mm,
struggling, if we felt uncomfortable, if we did something that was a little nerve wracking for us, it's probably a sign that we're challenging ourselves and we're in the process of evolution and change. And that's
mm,
great. And so we can choose to still feel good about that. We don't have to see those things or those feelings as bad. And so when people start to get in a daily routine or practice of thinking that way, I do believe that it's much easier to carry ourselves through those moments where we
mm,
really don't want to, or, we just feel like we're not being successful quite yet. it helps us continue moving forward until we really get to the end result, and then we can really, really celebrate. But yeah, not waiting till the end to get excited about those small wins. That's critical. We got to do that.
Oh, wow. I'm glad you mentioned about celebration because sometimes that can be really difficult for people. I mean, me personally, I find it very difficult to celebrate my wins. It's even harder to celebrate your failures, but I'm so thankful on how you rephrased it that like we can celebrate those little failures because there's probably something in there for us to learn in order to become a better version of ourselves. We find it, at least me, I find it really difficult to celebrate. And I was going to ask you, what are some ways that people can celebrate and you answered the question, but what I really want to pull out, it is not just a physical, it doesn't have to be a physical celebration, meaning, I don't have to get myself a bowl of ice cream. I don't have to go out to eat. We don't have to do that. No, we actually can just have a conversation and take in and enjoy or talk about and celebrate with words that thing that we're talking about. So I'm so glad you unpacked that a little bit. In your book, you mentioned breaking free of childhood programming and overcoming relationship failures. What advice would you give to someone who feels stuck in their past and they're struggling to move forward?
I am really happy you asked this because this is probably where the most amount of work was for me when I was recovering from that breakup, deciding the new person that I wanted to be, becoming a runner. I had to do a lot of this. I started realizing I had been working with some very faulty, incorrect beliefs, and I had gotten them from childhood. My parents meant well, but the way that they lived their lives and the beliefs they had, I realized I want to create and cultivate new ones. So I really had to work at this. Another really powerful lesson that I've learned is that in between every stimulus that comes at us in life, there is a space between that stimulus and our response. And in that space, we have the power to choose our response. And in that choice that we make comes all this power and all this freedom. And it's a trick or a tactic that I've learned, but extending the space between the stimulus and the response works wonders. And the reason why that is because we talked a little earlier, the subconscious mind, it operates at lightning quick speed and it just makes decisions for us very quickly. When we find a way to consciously slow that down and say, wait a minute, how am I feeling right now? Oh, I'm feeling kind of angry. I'm feeling insulted. I'm feeling offended. Is that the right emotion? Is that the way I want to feel? Is this response serving me? Let me think about it for an hour or a day before I send that email back. We'll usually, with the help of our conscious mind, because now we've created space for the conscious mind to get involved at its slower but often smarter pace, we will choose differently. We will not send the email that was all angry that we were about to, or we'll choose something that's better or more aligned with our long-term goals. And so I think the biggest thing we can do when we're overcoming these childhood programs is begin to slow things down and recognize that we're having a response and learn to kind of stop and pause before we have these knee-jerk reactions and say, is this the response I want to have? Is this the response that is going to get me where I want to go? Is it aligned with my current values? Is it the best response? Does it serve me? I have made a lot of different decisions since I started employing this, but I used to be a bit of a kind of a spitfire. If someone bothered me or said something slightly insulting, I'd snap right back and be like, well, and now
Okay, so I'm going to pause you right there because I wanted to ask the question, how did you, I know somebody's listening just like you and going, well, I just knee-jerk reaction, and I've done it too, and I've kind of got myself in trouble for it from time to time too. It's like you have something come at you and you just have that knee-jerk reaction. So what did you do to help yourself slow down and create that space between stimulus and response?
That's right. Oh, there's all sorts of things. There's, people say count to 5, take deep breaths, just make this commitment with yourself to, like, regardless of what's coming in, I always just pause before I respond. And even that small pause for a couple of seconds reminds us that it's possible to pause. And then we should, if we want, potentially we should pause longer. But I do think having some routines, models, frameworks, some affirmations, just things you say, if you do choose to say, I always just pause for a second to 30 seconds when information's coming in. One of the things that I use that pause to remind myself of over and over again, it's just become a practice, is what is this about? Is this about me? Is it personal, or is this potentially more about the other person or the situation that they're dealing with? We get caught off in traffic all the time, and so often you see people, raise a finger or shake a fist, or it looks like they're screaming an obscenity in their car, and they're not doing this because if they just paused for a second, they might say, "Oh my gosh, I have no idea what's going on in this person's life. Potentially, they're late for an interview, or their spouse is going to the hospital and giving labor, and they need to get somewhere really quickly. This might have nothing to do with me. They might have a bigger reason to be in a hurry than me right now. It's not personal. Maybe they just didn't see me." And so, kind of saying, I'm going to put the act of pausing. I take the deep breaths. I count to 5. I just continually teach myself it's good to always pause. But then developing a routine of what do I do with the pause? And that's a big one for me, is saying, is this personal? What is this about? What if there's something I don't know here? How could I find that out? Or maybe I ask a question before I make my final judgment. So talking myself through it, hard to do, but if you get in a habit or a routine of doing it, it does become easier, and it starts to become more natural. Hey, when we get weird information in, we do that. We slow down, we pause, think about it, then we respond. You can develop it over time and practice.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. I like that. Just pausing. How
Yeah.
often do we just not pause? It's amazing. We're talking a lot about relationships too, and how people interact with one another, how we see ourselves inside, and then how we realize there's transformation on the inside that needs to take place before we even look at what's going on the outside. And sometimes the outside, you actually have to be objective on that as well, and find out and ask yourself questions on what's going on the outside. So you talked a little bit about relationships. You talked about the traumatic event that happened, I think in 2015, where you had to break up with your boyfriend. And that was the what I would call the post-traumatic growth event that caused you down the path you're going down. I'm here to talk about your book, but my book, Small Steps, Big Wins, I unpack what post-traumatic growth is, the 5 different areas, and then I talk about my own journey through my own post-traumatic growth experiences. So there's a common thread anyway. So anyway, you went through these series of this traumatic event, and I'm sure there were other ones around there, and that was something that happened outside of you, but it's also inside as well. So your book highlights transforming relationships as a key benefit to applying the 6 habits. How did these 6 principles help you to build a fulfilling and lasting relationship? Currently in a relationship with your friend, your partner, David. So what advice can you give to us listening who are in that same kind of space now and looking to have meaningful relationships, maybe not with just a romantic partner, but just have meaningful relationships with people in general?
I love that. And I think the things that have worked in the current relationship that I'm in have worked in friendships. They've worked in people that I've led, at professional relationships with employees at work. A few things that are specific to the relationship with David. One thing I noticed that I had been doing, and this comes up a lot in the Trust and Treasure Yourself habit, was I was taught as a young girl to play this game of comparisons, be very competitive. I was always interested in where other people were at. And my thought was sort of, how do I beat them? How do I get ahead of them? And maybe that works well in sports, or it really drove me academically. And so there was some good that came out of it. But what I was realizing, it was just tearing apart my romantic relationships. And I had this mindset shift and realized that when people are in a romantic relationship, or even when they're best friends, or just a really close, any kind of relationship, figuring out what the shared goals are and choosing to believe that you're on the same team is a game changer. In the past, it felt like if my partners were successful, or they beat me in a game of pool or darts or ping pong or whatever it was, that their gain was kind of my loss. And I've dated a lot of guys that are really good at, sports, bar sports, just games in general. I think I spent a lot of time feeling frustrated, like, oh, they showed me up. Oh, they're better at this than I am. And what I learned to do was say, I should be happy for my partner's successes and wins as if they're my own. In the book, I told the story about how I learned to ski. David has taught me to ski. I used to be deathly afraid of it. But when we first were skiing the first year or two, I was really jealous of how good he was at it. And he stopped staying with me as much because he realized, okay, Amy can at least like get down the mountain. She doesn't need me to be right by her side. He's doing jumps off the peaks. He's going through the trees. He's like spinning, backflips and still gets down the mountain faster. And it took me a lot of that, stimulus and response, extend the space, what's going to serve me to make this conscious choice of I should be thrilled for how good David is at skiing. Like he's having so much fun. Maybe someday I'll get that good, but it is not about, comparison. I can just choose to be proud that I'm out here. Comparison really is the thief of joy. So figuring out what are his goals, what is he excited about, and championing those things, supporting him as if they were my own. And by the way, as I've learned to do that with vigor, I notice that the people we do that for, they get really excited about our goals and they pay it back. They get excited. So David's not much of a runner, but he is so dang excited about my marathons and my training, and goes out and kind of invests a lot of time to watch me do that because he knows that I'm going to support his soccer, his soaring journey. He's a glider pilot, and his skiing. And so it's nice when it becomes very reciprocal, but not looking as our partners as if they get what they want, then we didn't get what we want. Figuring out how do we find win-win solutions where everybody can emerge victorious. That was a really big shift in my thinking and my approach with how I dealt with partners.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that, just coming alongside somebody, even if you don't quite understand it, and I used to think the same way too. It's like, "Oh, they beat me in that," but the other thing I was thinking of, he was teaching you how to ski, and he's doing backflips and jumps and everything. I think we have to remind ourselves, like, at least I do this for myself. I ask myself now, "How long have I been doing that thing?" "Okay, it's 2 months." "How long has he been doing that thing?" "Oh, it's been 20 years." "Okay, I'm not we're not on the same page here, but I found that with friends that if they do certain things that could in my prior life would have caused jealousy or would have been comparison, I find myself getting really curious and saying, wow, that's really cool. How do you navigate that? Or where did you learn how to do that? Or what's the most exciting thing about what you're doing? And I find when I start getting curious about something that normally I would have become jealous over and start asking questions, then it flips it around and it makes it more like you talked about, like a win-win, but like on the same page. You're coming alongside the person, not coming at the person. So I'm glad you shared that. I think that's a really big deal, and it's a big mental shift too.
Yeah.
I was a high achiever as well. I still am in some respects, and yeah, I don't like to lose.
Yeah, I love
you
what
know?
you're talking about here.
Yeah.
It's a complete act of cognitive redirection, saying I
Right.
felt kind of envy and jealousy sort of creeping in. And there again is that subconscious mind trying to protect us, keep us safe, wanting us to feel really good about ourselves. So someone else doing something better than us kind of doesn't feel so good. And you saying, let me get curious about that. Let me ask some questions about that. Let me learn something from that. I could be really happy for my friend, but they also might teach me how to get better at it. And it's not a zero-sum game. Their win
Right.
isn't my
Right.
loss. The curiosity is such a cool virtue to have. And I really do think it's an awesome way for us to grow and develop and evolve as humans. And it is so much of a better reaction than jealousy. But it is kind of a redirect. We have to move ourselves to a place of it. But being there is actually really exciting. So I'm so
Yeah.
happy you brought up that concept of curiosity.
Yeah, yeah, I think and it helps neutralize jealousy. I
Yes,
think it does. When you're thinking
totally.
about somebody else in that capacity and you're like, "Okay, I'm not going to go that place. I'd rather just find out more about what they're doing versus me trying to be jealous that I can't do X, Y, or Z." So,
Love
yeah,
it.
I love the 6 habits that you've developed and you talk about, and I'm sure you've talked to a lot of different people and you've gotten a lot of different feedback and perspectives on it. What's something that very few people would agree with you on? And it doesn't necessarily have to be within the book, but what's something that you would say, "Hey, I know this, but they wouldn't agree with you."
We've touched on it a little bit, and I hate to say it, but it is the truth. I do find a lot of people that don't really agree that we can always choose our response.
Mm.
Some people can get so angry or so hurt by something that is happening to them. And I do believe that this happens most when it's tied into some sort of past trauma. And oftentimes it's childhood trauma. And the person will tell me, I am just so dang angry. Anybody would be angry about this. It would be weird if I wasn't angry. There is no other response I can pick right now. And that's not true. They absolutely could choose to get curious about what, why they've been harmed, or they feel so offended, or maybe what the other person's position is. But they really just don't want to. And, I might say, hey, it's probably not personal. It probably has more to do with that person and their paradigms and values than yours. And so you get the ability to choose your response and kind of like sit with yourself right now. And they're sort of like, yeah, I hear you saying that, but no, I can't. Not on this. Nobody would be able to do that with this specific situation. I guess I'll tell on kind of a family member. So my mother was married. My parents were married for 40 years, and then they got divorced pretty late, and they were in their 60s. And my mom, for a very long time, was extraordinarily hurt by the dissolution of their marriage, as lots of people would. But after several years of, sort of, I think, feeling like the victim and how could this have happened? And I got abandoned, and, I don't really want to look at, the fault maybe I played. I began kind of telling her, you have a choice in how you feel about this.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to carry all this pain and anger around towards my dad. You can move forward and see this as an opportunity for you to learn something. And her response was kind of, nope, that's just not what's going to happen here. And it was, I know she meant well, but it was tough kind of watching her struggle so much to realize she is making a choice. Her
Right.
anger was so deep, she didn't feel that she could make a choice. She just had to be angry. And so that's probably, I think, where some people disagree, that they really always have a choice. I think they say, well, sometimes I have a choice and I could make a better one. But other times, like, nope, this thing is black and white. This is very, it's right or it's wrong, and that's wrong. And that is not an opinion. That's a fact. And so that's something I struggle with in my interactions with people when that gets told to me.
Yeah. I think choice is one of those things where you actually have to have a switch in the brain, actually believe that you that you have a choice.
Yeah.
So I wonder if people who are having trouble with accepting that everything that they do is a choice, they actually have a limiting belief that says you don't have a choice, that there is no other choice. It's a
That's right.
belief that's stuck in there that once you let go of that and you believe that you can have a choice, then a choice presents itself. Like
Yep.
you have a choice in all things.
This
So
is a
choice is
measure of
interesting.
responsibility. I tend to
Sure.
define responsibility as response ability. So you have the ability to respond. And sometimes it's very hard to take responsibility. We want it to be someone else's fault. We don't want
Right.
to take accountability. And so we'll say this thing has happened to me, instead of saying maybe it's happening for you.
For me,
And,
yeah. That was a
And so
game
people don't
changer
like
for
that.
me. Yeah, I had a coach. I hired a coach last year in August, and we started coaching together. And I think the first or second session, he's like, Sue, do you believe that things happen to you or for you? And that was the first time I had ever heard that question posed to me. What a
Interesting.
game changer, because my knee-jerk reaction was, well, things happen to me. And then I realized, well, if I give that as the answer, then I play the victim of whatever it is. But if I say, okay, things happen for me, good, bad, or indifferent, it's the thing isn't the focus here. It's understanding that it happens for me. Well, then within that circumstance, I can walk away with whatever it is that I have to learn, or whatever it is that I need to see out of that situation. So
That's right. I
yeah,
love
I'm
that.
glad
I
you
love that you got
glad
asked
you
that.
mentioned
It's really
that.
great.
Yeah. It's a great question. Amy, I love our discussion. I know we could keep going forever and ever, but you know what? I have one question that I love to ask all my guests as we come to a close. It is, what is one question or topic you wish I would have asked about, and how would you have answered the question or expanded on the topic?
You've asked great questions, but
Yes.
since you're asking this one, I guess I would say I love when people ask me about the success my clients are having, and they want to hear about specific accomplishments, achievements, highlights in my clients' lives. And that's because I talk a lot about the 6 habits with my clients. And I do believe the habits work, and the success my clients are having kind of is proof of that. And so the way I would have answered it if you had asked, I would have shared that I have clients that are making changes in all areas of their lives, thanks to the habits and them really practicing it and using it, not just thinking about it or reading it, but finding ways to implement it. They've, some of them have moved on and made more money, moved into roles at work that they didn't think were possible for them. They've put their hat in the ring on jobs that they felt were sort of out of their league and gotten hired into those roles. I have 2 clients that have left companies and started their own businesses that now are doing well. And they were very nervous to leave and strike out on their own. And what if I fail? And what if I can't make it? And they have now been able to prove to themselves that they can absolutely survive and thrive as entrepreneurs. I have some clients that were struggling with, do I stay married? Maybe we should get divorced. Maybe this has just run its course, and now are in therapy and having much better outcomes with their partners. And they're finding ways to work together as a team and saying, oh my God, you wouldn't believe what a difference it is and how we're communicating. I have some clients that have gotten into better shape, and some of them have been afraid of, going to the gym and just being part of a fitness group because they were bullied when they were younger. And they're like, oh, that's just not for me. I'm not like an athletic person. And they have reproven to themselves that anybody can become athletic or fit and healthy. And they've made massive changes there. So it's really neat to see all the different ways that this framework has enhanced their lives. And I'm really proud of that. I'm proud of them mainly, but I am proud of their openness to consider these things and experiment, and then to actually see the payoff. So that's really what I would like to have told you about.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad you shared all that, because we can sit here listening and, they say success does leave clues. So you have a lot of success there. And with those 6 habits, and I'll just recap them for everybody too. Have honest humility. A is for action. B is befriend your brain. That's my favorite. I is inspire yourself. T is trust and treasure yourself. I like that one too. And S is stay securely strong. And we didn't talk too much about that one. Maybe that'll be another podcast. You can come back and talk about staying securely strong. When I say that, the image that comes to my mind is an anchor. To be anchored in what it is that makes you strong.
You're very insightful and perceptive, because that's probably the perfect analogy or visualization for it. Yeah, and it really is that staying true to your beliefs even when it's really difficult and you get pressed, because I think that happens. We figure out the direction, we're on our way there, and sometimes people kind of try to stop us or things stand in our way, and it's staying really committed in those tough moments. And the anchor is awesome. So great analogy.
Stay securely strong. I love it. Yeah, because it is. We're going to get blown all over the place. Even I found in my own life too, when I started to change certain things about what I was doing, and there were people who didn't agree with it, and it's like, nope, I've got this conviction. I'm going to keep going on that. Amy, as we close, what is one small step that someone can do today that's going to help them change their tomorrow?
Oh, that's great. There's so many things. I would say that one of the things that people are trying to get started, that a huge game changer, is to on the Monday morning of each week or the Sunday night, going into your week, if you can find time to sit down for an hour and a half and strategize, not just think about the tomorrow, but connect to the future and really go back to that vision of who do I want to become? What do I want life to be in 5 years? And then identify 1 or 2 things that you have to do or should do this specific week that are most important in getting you closer to that. Stick it on the calendar, block it out, give it a place to live and breathe. And then when other things come up that kind of, are going to be a conflict with it, say, gosh, I'm so sorry. I'd love to, but I can't. I already have this date or this, appointment with myself planned for the me I'm going to be in the future. So I have to keep this there. Anybody that does that, you'll watch their world go in a completely different direction, especially over a year or 2 period. Their trajectory becomes much steeper. They end up in a very different place because of that foresight they were willing to have. So that strategy time, that private time, that scheduling of the most important things, and the staying true to it, even if others kind of test us. That is probably the number one thing that people that are having great success do, and those that are struggling a little more are not doing. So that would be what it is.
Perfect. Thank you. How can people find you and reach out to you?
Lots of ways. I'm on Instagram under Amy M. Chambers. My website is amymchambers.com. YouTube is Coach Amy Chambers. I'm on LinkedIn, Amy Chambers, Facebook, Coach Amy Chambers. On all of those, there's links, there's contact forms. You can find me all over the place. But any of those are a great way to reach out.
Oh, well, thank you, Amy. I enjoyed our conversation very much. I wish you the best success on your book and with your coaching clients. And thank you for taking the time to talk to me. I really appreciate it.
Sue, this conversation's been absolutely awesome. I'm thrilled to have been here today. You're terrific.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. I value your time with me, and I seek to make every moment count. In order to make lasting change in your life, listening is usually not enough. So I want to ask you, what practical steps are you going to put into action today as a result of listening to this podcast? Remember, any step, any action, no matter how small, starts your journey to a big win. And if you're not sure where to get started, reach out to me and let's have a conversation. Until next time, love yourself, then love others. Peace.